Multiple sclerosis is truly a complicated disease, and it has to be said at the outset that we don't know exactly what causes multiple sclerosis.
It still is somewhat unclear why the abnormal inflammation develops in the nervous system. One prevailing theory has been that it's autoimmune, that the immune system makes a mistake and attacks the nervous system as if it were a foreign germ. And then the other prevailing theory is that the immune system is detecting something abnormal in the nervous system, either an infection or some metabolic abnormality, and it's reacting to that.
In the case of MS, it's best to think of the immune system as having elements. Those elements can be called good guys or bad guys in terms of their behavior in the particular disease, MS. In MS, there is overactivity of the immune system. And that overactivity is caused by what are called T and B lymphocytes.
The old dogma was that MS was due to T cells attacking myelin. That doesn't play out. That can't be the simple answer. That's a piece of the puzzle, but it's not the entire picture.
For many years, the so-called T lymphocyte, the white blood cell that is most commonly associated with problems associated with MS, has been studied, and many of the medicines that we use now act on T cells or somehow affect T cells.
We're now getting evidence that B cells are involved and antibody and complement is playing a role.
A variety of different therapies have arisen over the course of the last just a couple of years that specifically are directed against B lymphocytes. And they hold a great deal of promise, and multiple different types of them have been developed.
Monoclonal antibodies are now being developed as treatment for MS. As a matter of fact, we have one monoclonal antibody that's already an approved disease-modifying therapy. The rationale for monoclonal antibodies is that you theoretically have much greater specificity.
You're starting to see a lot of sort of what we call targeted therapies or approaches that are not so much a broad spectrum immune attack or trying to turn down the immune system as we see, but much more defined and saying we're only going to go after the cells that are specifically bad actors in MS.
The monoclonal antibody will bind to its target, and whatever cells the target happens to be on, those are the cells that the monoclonal antibody will be affecting. Once the monoclonal antibody binds to its receptors, the effect will vary depending on that particular monoclonal antibody and receptor. One way of thinking about a receptor would be to define it as a molecular landing site to bind your antibody. In some cases, it simply blocks the receptor and prevents that cell from interacting with other components of the body that required the receptor free to bind to its other site. But in certain cases, the binding of the monoclonal antibody may actually result in a subsequent cascade that might, for example, wind up killing the cell. So the monoclonal antibody may cause the targeted cell to die, and in a disease state such as MS, that can turn out to be a good thing. There are several interesting monoclonals that are currently in evaluation for MS. They're not proven yet as treatments for MS, but I believe that one or more of them probably will be in the next couple of years.
Multiple sclerosis, the body treats myelin as if it is a foreign antigen and creates antibodies that are directed towards myelin and cause damage in binding to the myelin. So antigen-specific therapies in this particular instance would be designed to make the body more tolerant, in other words, less prone to attack the myelin, like with allergy injections, where we're trying to convince the body to not attack the offending allergen. And it's that kind of idea, the allergy treatment idea, that's embodied by this particular antigen-specific therapy. By giving patients parts of the myelin protein, we are going to induce or persuade the body to stop attacking the myelin. Another antigen-specific therapy would involve creating a protein that binds to the other proteins that allow cells to migrate from blood vessels into the brain.
Typically, there's a barrier to immune cells going into the nervous system, the so-called blood-brain barrier. But under certain circumstances, the immune cells can pass through the blood-brain barrier, go into the brain, and produce an inflammatory response. So one strategy to treating MS would be to prevent cells from migrating from the blood through the blood-brain barrier into the nervous system. So one of the approved medications works via that mechanism. It prevents inflammatory cells from sticking to the walls of blood vessels and prevents them from migrating through the blood vessels into the brain. Another medication that's currently being tested also affects immune cell migration in a different way. It retains lymphocytes within the lymph nodes, keeps them away from the nervous system, and also interrupts the abnormal circulation between the nervous system and the lymph nodes. Approaches that target lymphocyte trafficking appear to be very effective in multiple sclerosis. The potential drawback is that lymphocyte trafficking is involved in normal function of the immune system, looking for infections, for example. So the concern is that these treatments, while being effective in MS, may also predispose people to infections.